My Singing Monsters is a mobile game that, while popular, never quite had the following that a lot of its contemporaries got. But in an unusual turn of events, it's actually had quite the resurgence as of late. And by that, I mean the game's experiencing one hell of a second wind. It's actually even more popular than ever before, outperforming mainstays in the very same genre, those being Dragon City, Boom Beach, Simpsons Tapped Out, and even Clash of Clans. Looking at the data, it seems pretty difficult to believe. A game that was released over a decade ago is just randomly getting a ton of recognition out of nowhere? I'm gonna need a closer look here. So what's the full story of the company behind it? And what's the impact they might end up leaving on the industry with their breakout success? This is the story of My Singing Monsters, reviving a dead genre. Big Blue Bubble was founded in 2002 by Damir and Renata Slogar, and in the beginning they decided to specialize in creating casual and mobile games. They made their first two games that same year, Bubble Trouble and Geeks, both of which were designed for pre-Apple smartphones, phones that look like this. In 2004, they would finally become incorporated, and a woman named Claudette Critchley joined the team. They continued working on many different projects for the next 8 years. Obviously, a lot of mobile games, but they even ended up developing some licensed games on the Nintendo Wii and DS. But nothing really seemed to gain much traction. And that carries over to August of 2012, when My Singing Monsters would be released. It was a game that fell into the, at the time, niche genre of world-building simulation games. But unlike other popular mobile releases I've talked about in the past, My Singing Monsters actually didn't get an insane amount of growth right away. It actually took a full year to start gaining notoriety, as August 2013 is when it would hit its first peak. So what caused it to get so popular so suddenly? And why now? Well, the answer is that they must have spent a lot of money on advertisements. If you look at the most popular video on their YouTube channel, you'll see that the trailer for the game has accumulated a staggering 70 million views. If you had to guess the amount of comments that would be typical for a video with that many views, you'd probably guess that it would be somewhere around the 10 to 50,000 range. Right? Well, the real number is just 3,000. Looking at it face on, it seems to not make any sense, until you realize the context that it was used as an advertisement. Of course no one would leave a comment on it since it was impossible to. It would just appear as a pre-roll before another video starts. But why would they wait a full year before advertising their game? While My Singing Monsters got its fair share of updates, I believe there was an outside factor that caused them to step on the gas in terms of advertising. That being the growing popularity of other games in the same genre. To be specific, Clash of Clans and Dragon City. 2013 was the best year for the world-building genre, with Game of War Fire Age and Monster Legends releasing that same year, on top of it being the societal peak for Dragon City, and a growing amount of attention going towards Clash of Clans. So it would only make sense for Big Blue Bubble to jump at the opportunity to make their game take off. But if there are so many games to choose from, why would people decide to play My Singing Monsters over anything else? Especially when comparing it to the other games that were already around. Well, at the time, most people didn't play My Singing Monsters. As I already mentioned, 2013 was the year for Dragon City to shine, and anyone who didn't play Dragon City probably played Clash of Clans instead, as that was the game that was also on the rise. This could be because of their battle modes. Variety in gameplay is the best thing you could have in terms of retaining a player base. And since My Singing Monsters is a game that has no combat whatsoever, it might have actually led people towards the other games instead. Now, I do want to point out that there's a battle mode now, but in 2013 it just wasn't there. But regardless, there actually is something that My Singing Monsters has to differentiate itself from every other game in the genre. There was an intrinsic attribute that makes the game more appealing on a fundamental level. Would you like to guess what that might be? Yeah, music is something people have been enjoying ever since we discovered that we could bang a stick against a rock. And something great about music is that it's very replayable. And with My Singing Monsters, you can quite literally hear the game's progression, as each new monster incorporates a new element of song into the background music, which gives you audible feedback as you add more monsters to your island. Since the first My Singing Monsters, Big Blue Bubble released 3 other games in the series, those being Dawn of Fire, Composer, and Playground. Dawn of Fire is the first sequel, and it was released in September of 2015. The main thing that separates this game from the first one is the fact that this time, all the monsters are babies. Then they can grow up over the course of the game. Very cool. I don't really see this as a replacement to the original though. It's more like a follow-up album, having more original songs to listen to. It's just that I feel like the first game has more iconic music. Composer was released on April 25th, 2018. And this game lets you compose your own My Singing Monsters song and have the characters perform it right in front of your very eyes. You can also do this, too. There's already a Composer Island on the main map, so I don't really know why this is here. In 2020, Big Blue Bubble was acquired by a Swedish holding company called EG7 for $76 million. A holding company is a company that specializes in owning smaller companies. Wowzers! Renata would retire later that year, and Demir would end up retiring the year after. That year being 2021, when My Singing Monsters Playground was released, and it's the newest and weirdest sequel yet. This is like a minigame collection where you can play as some of the iconic monsters. Why? It's like Mario Party, but with that My Singing Monsters charm. They actually got back to console game development for this one, as it isn't even a mobile game. It was released on consoles and Steam. I mean, good job for branching out, but man, that kinda came out of left field. And there was also like 5 different spin-offs. So now cut to the present day. Claudette Critchley is now the CEO, and as with the other companies known for making a mobile game released 10 years ago, they aren't doing particularly well. While the genre of world-building simulation game isn't necessarily a dead genre, as there are several other games on the App Store doing perfectly fine, most of these games have long since peaked, with only their more dedicated players still sticking around. Dragon City and Monster Legends are sponsoring YouTubers trying to get more players, and Supercell's been focusing more on Clash Royale than Clash of Clans, as they're probably more inspired to work on the newer game. I'd say that the genre is definitely not in the best spot at the moment. At least, that's what I would have said if My Singing Monsters didn't just blow up to be even more popular than it ever was. So, what happened here? Well, here's my best guess, as finding the appropriate information for this kind of thing is tricky. So sometime around late October, someone posted about My Singing Monsters on TikTok. The current year is 2022, 10 years after the game was first released. And if the story of Minecraft is anything to go by, it takes about, give or take, 10 years for people to feel nostalgic enough towards a game to go back and revisit it. And that's exactly what seems to have happened with My Singing Monsters. Since it's a music game, people could use it as funny sounding background music for TikToks, as well as other types of memes. And that puts the game in the perfect position where people who are familiar with the game could revisit it for nostalgic purposes, and new players could learn about the game from TikTok and try it themselves for the very first time. My Singing Monsters finally has a large community of its own, making jokes and haha funny XD TikTok memes about Wubbox and Furcorn. Is this success gonna last forever? Probably not. TikTok trends, just like modern memes and the fish you win at the carnival, are known for dying just after a few short weeks. But there's still just a spark of hope that the people who are getting into the game grow attached. This leaves a small spark of hope that legacy mobile games still have a place to stay in the modern era. And while I'm not the biggest fan of the waiting simulator type of games myself, I'm actually pretty happy to see it doing well again. Despite being bought out by a bigger company, Big Blue Bubble is still a surprisingly small studio, and it's being run the same way it always had been, except now they can duet Angry Birds on TikTok. Yes, this is real. My Singing Monsters is a game I played for a little bit back in 2014, then forgot about. So seeing it being played again by a completely new group of people is something I find really cool to see. Now we just gotta hope that the same thing happens with Chuzzle.